A plane carrying dozens of Ukrainian POWs has reportedly been shot down over Russia by Ukraine themselves. But there is a lot more to this story than I think we are seeing on the surface. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, so first, let's go over the overall contours of what's publicly known about this story. And that is that Russia is accusing Ukraine of shooting down a plane carrying their own prisoners of war in the Belgorod region. Now, bear in mind, guys, Belgorod is an area within Russia that is a quasi part of the front lines here in the Ukraine war. And I say that because it's where Ukrainian partisan forces are most active, and it's frequently a point where you see a pretty high level of activity. You can see major city of Kharkiv, right? And here's the town of Belgorod. But this whole region has been a real battleground between the Freedom of Russia Legion, which is conducting cross-border raids and guerrilla operations. It's also likely been a staging area for Russian drone and missile attacks into towns like Kharkiv, right? There was actually recently a huge missile strike within the Kharkiv region that targeted civilian centers. And so, right, for Ukrainian forces, of course, this Belgorod looks like a frontline town, even though it doesn't have necessarily a frontline level of troop deployments. It's certainly, to the residents, they feel absolutely like they are deep in the war zone. Now, the public story about this shootdown is in Belgorod, right? A IL-76 aircraft was downed by what Russia says were Ukrainian anti-air missiles. And there is footage available of an IL-76 going down, reportedly in Belgorod, that most journalists seem to have said is authentic. So it seems likely that a Russian aircraft did go down. And again, the question is, was it really Ukrainian air defenses, or was it more like just a failure of Russian aircraft maintenance? Now, the Ukrainian armed forces have not publicly made a statement one way or another, but they acknowledged that there had been an increase in the intensity of the shelling in the region, as we just talked about, and that an increased number of Russian military transport planes have been going to the Belgorod airfield, which Ukrainian intelligence said is a logistics hub for these missile strikes against eastern Ukraine. And that Ukrainian military, of course, saying that they continue to take measures to destroy both the means of delivery and dominate the airspace to destroy the threat presented by Russia. Now, Ukraine has said we don't have reliable or comprehensive information about who was on board the plane or in what number, but it did confirm that a prisoner exchange was supposed to take place on Wednesday. But it said, quote, Ukraine was not informed about the number of vehicles, routes, and forms of delivery of prisoners. The quote continues, it's known that prisoners are delivered by air, rail, and road. And they said this may indicate deliberate actions by Russia aimed at endangering the lives and safety of prisoners. Now, before I get into what I think happened, of course, guys, I wanted to talk about StrikeGum. StrikeGum is, of course, my own product, right? You know, a lot of sponsors don't want to touch war content. So I, of course, launched the thing that I wish existed. When I was on deployment, right, I depended on energy drinks like these. But you see, 160 calories, 41 grams of sugar, lots and lots of just gross carbonation when you drink it. I used to literally carry stuff like this in my pocket, and I hated it. I wish there was a better way to get the same caffeine. 90 milligrams of caffeine are in every single piece of StrikeGum, right? And 0 sugar, 100 milligrams of alpha. And of course, if you guys want to get your hands on some, we have military discounts. We also have first-time purchaser discounts. So check us out at StrikeGum.com. And thanks to the thousands of people who've already supported StrikeGum. Okay, so let's talk about what I think has actually happened here. I think that, there's a couple of notes, right? One of the things that we've seen from Russia already is that Russia has a certain sense of poetic justice when they're exacting revenge. For example, Putin destroyed Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner group, remember, he shot down Prigozhin in an aircraft with an anti-aircraft weapon. And that's fitting because during the Wagner mutiny, Wagner shot down almost a dozen Russian military aircraft likely because no ground troops were available to stop the Wagner mutiny or were loyal enough to stop the Wagner mutiny. So when Putin wanted to strike back at Prigozhin, he wanted to put a little bit of a poetic flourish. And so he took out Prigozhin's aircraft just as the Wagner group had taken out those Russian combat aircraft. And so the fact that this was an IL-76, to me, harkens back to the fact that several weeks ago, Ukrainian air defenses took out a Russian radar, an AWACS plane, and an IL-76 command plane. This is, of course, the same airframe, but loaded with aircraft commanders who are able to see and coordinate air operations on the battlefield while in flight. So that was a massive loss to Russia. And so Russia likely wanted to engage in some level of punitive action. This is totally par for the course for them. And so that's why I think they flew an IL-76 into Kharkiv without telling the Ukrainians that it was going to be a prisoner exchange plane, and then landed in Kharkiv just a few days after there were massive strikes against the city. Let's see if I can find it here. Kharkiv strikes. There you go. Kharkiv strikes. Yeah, one day ago, you can see within Kharkiv, massive strikes resulting in 18 dead and 130 injured. One of the largest strikes that we've seen from Kharkiv. And then the next day, Russia tells no one, and they fly an IL-76 right at the city where these strikes likely originated. Bear in mind, guys, Belgorod, Kharkiv, right? So the fact that Russia would do this, and right now, based on what Ukraine has said, it sounds like Russia deliberately did not disclose that that plane was carrying POWs. And remember, guys, it is a war crime to deliberately place POWs in a situation, in an environment where they are highly likely to cause harm. And in this case, it may actually constitute using them as human shields, because think about it. Now, going forward, if that were true, Ukraine will have to double check, or think twice rather, anytime they see a military transport aircraft moving towards the Belgorod region, right? So what they've done, Russia has effectively used these POWs, I believe, as human shields to allow their transport aircraft, which they've discovered are very vulnerable, probably more vulnerable than they thought, to allow their transport aircraft to move unfettered to and from Belgorod and other regions, right? So for Putin, he likely feels he's really pulled a fast one on the Ukrainians, forcing them to kill their own soldiers, and in the process created a screening mechanism that will stop Ukrainian air defenses from targeting legitimate military targets carrying Russian military equipment. And so this is a classic Russian move, if there ever was one. That is my opinion on this. Right now, of course, some people are saying that there's no indication that there were Ukrainians on board at all. There's also, of course, the fact that some leaked documents where where Russia claims to have a flight manifest. Actually, some of the prisoners on that manifest were found to have already been released in previous exchanges. So that sort of lends credence to the idea that perhaps there weren't actually POWs on that aircraft. So it really is a difficult to understand situation. But again, creating confusion in the battlefield is in Russia's favor, right? It's going to make Ukraine gun shy. It's going to make them look bad, and it's going to make everyone second guess their actions, except, of course, for Russia, who knows the truth. Anyway, that's all I had, guys. Of course, thank you so much to all the members of combatvetnews.com. Hit like and subscribe. See you in the next one. Cheers.